There was a time when I would have laughed at the idea of my wife betraying me. We had built a life together, layer by layer, like the foundation of a house. But even the strongest foundations can crack, and mine had been cracking for a while. It started with little things. Nothing you could call concrete proof, just a whisper of doubt that gnawed at the back of my mind. She was distracted more often, her laughter slightly forced, her eyes not quite meeting mine when she spoke. I told myself I was imagining it. After all, we'd been together for years, and rough patches were normal. But in my gut, I knew something had changed. That night, the air in our house felt heavy, thick with something unspoken. I walked into the living room just in time to see her hastily closing a video call on her laptop. Her hands were quick, too quick. A forced smile stretched across her lips as she looked up at me. "Hey," she said, her voice light, casual. Too casual. "Hey," I replied, my eyes flicking to the screen. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. My pulse had picked up, but I forced myself to stay still. If she noticed my tension, she didn't show it. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, my tone neutral. She hesitated, a fraction of a second, but I caught it. "Just an old friend from college. We hadn't talked in ages." "An old friend," I echoed, stepping forward. "Funny, I didn't hear you mention them before." Her smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes shifted. "It's not a big deal," she said, standing up. "I was just catching up." I let it go, or at least, I let her think I did. But as soon as she went upstairs, I turned to her laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, I opened it. And that was the moment my world split apart. I sat down at the dining table, my hands resting on the cool surface of her laptop. The screen was still illuminated, the faint glow casting shadows across my fingers. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, each beat a war drum leading me into battle. I hesitated. Did I really want to do this? The answer came swiftly, yes. I had spent too long ignoring my gut, too long making excuses for the way she had changed. If I was wrong, then I'd feel guilty for invading her privacy. But if I was right, if my suspicions were even halfway true, then this was something I needed to see. I tapped the keyboard, waking up the screen. The messaging app was still open. The cursor blinked at me, as if taunting me to look away. But I didn't. My eyes scanned the chat history, my breath catching in my throat as the words burned into my brain. Him, "I miss you already. I hate waiting to see you again." Her, "I know, baby. I wish we had more time tonight." Him, "If only he wasn't in the way." I stopped reading. My vision tunneled, the letters blurring together in a haze of red-hot anger. Baby. She called him that. It was a name that once belonged to me. I forced myself to keep reading, even as my stomach twisted into knots. Her, "He was downstairs the whole time. I almost got caught." Him, "That would have been bad. But thrilling, no?" Her, "Haha, you love playing with fire, don't you?" I closed the laptop with a sharp snap. My breathing was uneven, my fingers curling into fists. My wife, was playing games behind my back. And this wasn't just casual flirtation. No, this was something deeper. The way she spoke to him, the way she shared with him, she had given him pieces of herself that were supposed to be mine. I felt sick. A part of me wanted to storm upstairs, shake her awake, and demand answers. But another part, the colder part, whispered, "No, not yet. Not like this." If she thought she could play me for a fool, she was dead wrong. The next morning, she was all smiles. "Morning, love," she chirped, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I let her. My lips barely moved against her skin, but she didn't seem to notice. She was too busy tapping away on her phone, probably texting him. My stomach turned at the thought. I watched her, studying every movement, every glance, every carefully placed word. And for the first time, I saw it all clearly. The way she angled her phone away from me. The way she bit her lip as she read a message, her eyes flickering with something private. The way she barely looked at me when she spoke. It had all been there for weeks. I just hadn't wanted to see it. But now? Now I saw everything. "So, any plans today?" she asked, sliding her phone into her pocket. I forced a smile. Just work. You? She shrugged. Not much. Maybe I'll grab lunch with Monica. Monica, the fake best friend she always used as a cover. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Sounds fun. She leaned in, kissing my cheek again before heading toward the door. See you later. I watched her leave, my fingers tightening around my coffee mug. She thought she was in control. She thought she was winning. But she had no idea that the game had only just begun. I spent the next few days gathering proof. I wasn't going to confront her without knowing every detail. I wanted to know where she went, who she met, how far she had gone, and most importantly, I wanted to know exactly how to break her. I started small. I checked her call logs when she was in the shower. I read more of their messages, taking screenshots and sending them to my own email. Then I followed her. She said she was meeting Monica for lunch. She lied. Instead, she drove across town to a quiet little cafe, one I had never even heard her mention before. And then he arrived. A man, mid-30s, well-dressed, clean-shaven. He walked in confidently, scanning the room before locking eyes with her. Her face lit up. She stood, wrapping her arms around his neck, pressing her lips to his in a way that made my stomach churn. I watched from my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. She didn't just kiss him. She melted into him, like she belonged to him, like I was nothing more than an afterthought. I forced myself to sit there, to watch, to commit every movement to memory. I was done pretending this wasn't happening. The woman I loved was gone, and the stranger wearing her face had no idea what was coming. That night, I acted normal. I kissed her. I held her in my arms. I pretended I didn't know. She curled up against me, completely unaware that I had seen her kiss another man just hours ago, that I had watched her smile for him, laugh for him, touch him in ways she had stopped touching me. She fell asleep easily. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with 1,000 possibilities. Confrontation? No. Too soon. Begging? Never. Revenge? Yes. A slow, deliberate undoing. She had destroyed me. Now it was my turn, and I would make sure she felt every single second of it. The weight of the truth settled over me like a thick fog. I could barely breathe under it. She was mine, and yet she had given herself to another. For days, I carried this knowledge in silence. I let her kiss me, touch me, talk to me as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Every word she spoke felt like a lie. Every touch felt like poison. And still, she had no idea. She had no idea that I had seen her with him. She had no idea that I had read their messages. She had no idea that I was about to ruin her. It happened on a Sunday evening. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, probably texting him. I sat across from her, pretending to read a book, but my eyes weren't on the pages. They were on her, watching, studying, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed. She glanced at me, just for a second, then turned slightly, just enough to shield the screen from my view. She smiled. A small, secretive smile. That was it. That was the moment I knew. It was time. Hey, I said, my voice calm. She looked up, startled. Yeah. I smiled. Can I borrow your laptop for a minute? Mine's acting up. She hesitated. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see the fear flicker in her eyes. Sure, she said, forcing a laugh. Let me just close some stuff. She moved too fast, her fingers tapping at the keyboard with frantic energy. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Everything okay? Yeah, she said quickly. Too quickly. Then she handed me the laptop, her smile tight. I took it, my heart pounding. She had just deleted something. I was sure of it. But she didn't know that I had already seen everything. I opened the laptop, pretending to type something, then turned the screen toward her. You forgot to close this. Her eyes landed on the chat window, the very one she had been using to message him. For a moment, she didn't react. Then she went still. Completely, utterly still. Like a deer caught in headlights. My chest tightened as I watched the blood drain from her face. Who's Nick? I asked, my voice eerily calm. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. He's lying isn't going to help you, I said, leaning back. I already know. Her hands trembled as she reached for the laptop, but I pulled it away. You don't have to read that, she whispered. I laughed. A cold, hollow laugh. I already did. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Then, finally, she spoke. It's not what you think. My jaw clenched. Really? Her lips parted, her eyes wide, desperate. Don't, I said sharply. She flinched. You cheated, I said, my voice even, controlled. You lied, and you thought I'd never find out? Tears welled in her eyes. Please, just let me explain. I tilted my head, watching her crumble in real time. Go ahead, I said. Explain how you let another man touch you. Explain how you called him baby while I was sitting downstairs. Explain how you planned to meet him behind my back. Her lip quivered. I didn't mean. You did mean to, I interrupted. You meant every word you said to him. You meant every kiss, every lie. You just didn't mean to get caught. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I still love you. I laughed again. Love? I repeated. Is that what you call this? I made a mistake, she choked out. A horrible, stupid mistake. I leaned in, my voice dropping. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. What you did was a choice. She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I watched her cry, but I felt nothing. No sadness, no pity, no remorse. Just cold, calculating rage. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. Not by a long shot. For the next few days, I let her think she still had control. I let her cry. I let her beg. I let her believe that she could somehow fix this. But she couldn't. Because while she was busy trying to win me back, I was planning something much, much worse. Revenge. And I was going to make sure she felt every single ounce of the pain she had inflicted on me. The first thing I did was take control of our finances. She had no idea that I had already moved most of our shared money into an account under my name. The second thing I did was gather more evidence. Screenshots, messages, photos, everything. The third thing? I called a lawyer. By the time she realized what was happening, it was too late. Why is our joint account empty? She asked one night, her voice shaky. I shrugged. Oh, I just thought it would be safer this way. She paled. You can't just take everything. I smirked. Actually, I can. Tears filled her eyes. What are you doing? I stood, walking over to her slowly. You destroyed us, I said. So now, I'm destroying you. She gasped, stepping back. No, please, But I didn't let her finish. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the evidence I had collected. The screenshots, the photos, the messages. Tomorrow, I said, I'll be sending these to your family, your friends, your boss. Her hands flew to her mouth. No, you wouldn't. I smiled. Watch me. She screamed. A raw, broken sound. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt alive. By the end of the week, she was begging me not to do it. She swore she would make it right. She swore she would change. But it was too late. I had already set everything in motion. And when I finally walked out the door, leaving her sobbing on the floor, I didn't look back. Not once. Because this was just the beginning. I stood in the doorway, watching her collapse onto the floor. Her body shook with heavy sobs, her fingers clutching at the hem of my shirt like a lifeline. Please, she whispered. Please, don't do this. I looked down at her. This woman I had once loved, the woman I had built my life around. But now all I saw was a stranger, a liar, a woman who had smiled at me every morning while carrying on a secret life with another man. I gently pried her fingers off me, one by one. You already did this, I said coldly. She flinched as if I had struck her. I turned and walked away, leaving her crumpled on the floor like the wreckage of the life we had built. But this wasn't over. Not yet. No, I had only just begun. The next morning, I set everything in motion. The emails, the messages, the photos. By noon, everyone knew. Her parents, her friends, her boss, even Nick's wife. I wasn't sure how she would react to the news, but I imagined it wouldn't end well for him. Good. By the time I got home that evening, the house was eerily quiet. No more fake smiles. No more forced conversations. Just a crushing, suffocating silence. She was in the bedroom, curled up on the bed, staring at nothing. "You sent them," she whispered, her voice hollow. I dropped my keys onto the nightstand. "Of course I did." She let out a shuddering breath. "My mom called me today. She was crying. She said she didn't raise me to be this kind of person." I shrugged. Maybe she didn't. But here you are. Her eyes darted to me, filled with something like desperation. "We can fix this," she pleaded. "I know I messed up, but we don't have to let it end like this. We can go to therapy. We can?" I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "Therapy?" I repeated. "You think sitting in a room while some stranger asks us to talk about our feelings is going to change the fact that you had another man's hands on you?" She flinched. I took a step closer, my voice dropping. "You betrayed me, and now you're paying for it." Tears welled in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you," she choked out. I tilted my head. "Oh, did you trip and fall into his bed?" She let out a broken sob. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her fall apart, and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no sadness, just the cold, quiet satisfaction of knowing that she was finally feeling even a fraction of what she had put me through. But this was only the beginning. By the next day, the whispers had started. At her office, in our neighborhood, among our friends. She was the woman who had cheated, the liar, the backstabber. She tried to act like it didn't bother her, but I saw the way her hands trembled when she checked her phone, the way she turned pale when a coworker walked past her without saying a word. She was drowning, and I was standing on the shore, watching her sink. One evening, she came home later than usual, her face streaked with dried tears. "I lost my job," she murmured. I took a sip of my beer, barely looking up. "Shame," she snapped. "You did this to me," she screamed. "You ruined my life." I finally met her eyes, my expression calm, unreadable. "You ruined it yourself?" She smashed a glass against the wall, shards flying across the room. "I made a mistake, and you're acting like you tore our marriage apart?" I finished for her. She froze. I set my beer down and stood, slowly closing the distance between us. "You don't get to be the victim here," I said quietly. "You made your choices. Now you live with them." She let out a choked sob, her shoulders shaking. I don't know what to do." I shrugged. "That's not my problem anymore." Her eyes widened. You're leaving?" I smirked. "No, sweetheart. You are." Her breath hitched. "You wouldn't." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a document. An eviction notice. Her eyes darted between me and the paper, disbelief washing over her features. "You're kicking me out," she whispered. I nodded. She let out a hollow laugh, shaking her head. "You can't do this. This is my home too." I smirked. "Actually, it's not. I made sure of that." Her face crumpled as realization set in. She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "You really want to hurt me, don't you?" I leaned in, my voice calm, cold, final. "I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she broke. She fell to her knees, sobbing. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't do this." But I had already turned away. I had nothing left to say. 3 days later, she was gone. I came home to an empty house. No clothes in the closet. No toothbrush in the bathroom. No her. I stood in the silence, letting it sink in. And then, I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I was free. The house was quiet. Too quiet. For the first time in years, I was alone. No laughter in the background. No footsteps in the hall. No smell of her perfume lingering in the air. I should have felt relieved. Maybe even victorious. This was what I wanted. She was gone. The woman who had lied to me, who had whispered sweet nothings into another man's ear while calling me her husband. She was out of my life for good. And yet, the silence pressed in on me like a weight. I walked through the house, room by room, expecting to feel something, anything, but all I found was emptiness. The bed felt bigger. The living room felt colder. The kitchen felt useless. I stood at the counter, staring at the spot where she used to make her morning coffee. She always left a mess, sugar grains scattered on the counter, a half-used spoon resting on the edge of the sink. I used to find it annoying. Now, it was just another reminder that she wasn't here, that she wasn't coming back. I let out a slow breath and rubbed a hand over my face. What the hell was wrong with me? I had one. I had played my cards, burned her world down, and walked away without a scratch. So why did it feel like I had lost something too? For the next few weeks, I tried to move forward. I went back to work. I hit the gym. I even met up with some old friends, guys I hadn't really spoken to in years because I had been so wrapped up in her. I told myself I was fine. But at night, when the world quieted down and there was no one to distract me, the memories crept in. The way she used to rest her head on my chest while we watched movies. The way she laughed when she was caught off guard. Really laughed, not the fake kind she had been giving me in those final months. The way she used to look at me, like I was the only man in the world. I clenched my jaw, pushing those thoughts aside. She wasn't that woman anymore. She had chosen to betray me, and I had chosen to destroy her. I needed to let it go. One evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello? Silence. Then, a quiet breath. And then, her voice. Hey, she said, barely above a whisper. A mix of emotions slammed into me all at once. Anger, resentment, curiosity. I leaned against the counter, gripping the phone tighter. Why are you calling me? She let out a shaky breath. I don't know. I scoffed. That's not an answer. I know, she admitted. I wanted to hear your voice. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay calm. What do you want, Clara? A pause. I miss you, she said softly. A bitter laugh escaped me. No, you don't. I do, she insisted. Her voice broke. I hate what I did. I hate myself for it. I said nothing. Because what was I supposed to say? That I forgave her? That we could somehow fix this? No, that wasn't happening. Where are you? I finally asked. She hesitated. Staying with a friend. Nick? I spat his name like venom. Her voice cracked. No, I haven't spoken to him since everything. I didn't know if I believed her. I didn't know if I cared. You got what you wanted, I said coldly. Now leave me alone. She let out a quiet sob. I never wanted this. I clenched my jaw. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you let another man touch you. Silence. And then, she hung up. I exhaled slowly, staring at the phone screen. My hands were shaking. Not with sadness. With rage. Because she had no right to miss me. No right to feel regret. She had made her choice. And now, she had to live with it. The next day, I drove past her old workplace. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I wanted to see if she had moved on. Maybe I wanted to see if she was still suffering. But as I pulled up near the office building, I saw her sitting on a bench outside. She looked different. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes slightly wrinkled. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she clutched her phone in her hands, staring at it like she was waiting for something, or someone. For a split second, I felt, no. I pushed the thought away. I didn't feel sorry for her. I wouldn't. I started to drive away, but at the last second, she looked up. Our eyes met, and in that brief moment, I saw it. The pain, the guilt. She wasn't the same woman who had smirked at her phone while texting another man. She was broken. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I just kept driving, leaving her behind again. Because this time, it was her turn to suffer. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. I should have felt satisfied, but instead, I felt empty. Destroying her hadn't filled the void she left behind. It had only made it deeper. I had won the war, but in the end, I had lost something too. The days blurred together. I told myself I was fine. I kept going to work, hitting the gym, having drinks with old friends. On the surface, life was moving forward. I was moving forward. But at night, When the world slowed down and I was left with nothing but silence, the emptiness crept in. I had won. I had destroyed her. So why did it feel like I had burned myself in the process? One evening, I was sitting at the bar, nursing a drink, when an old friend slid onto the stool beside me. "Been a while, man," Jason said, signaling for a whiskey. "Yeah," I muttered, taking a sip of my beer. He glanced at me, studying my face. "How are you holding up?" I let out a dry laugh. "Never better." Jason didn't look convinced. "I heard about what happened," he said carefully. "About Clara." The mention of her name made something tighten in my chest. "You don't have to talk about it," he added quickly. I exhaled sharply. "It's over. She's gone." He took a sip of his whiskey. "And you think that's enough?" I frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Jason turned to face me fully. "I know you, man. You can pretend all you want, but I see it. You got your revenge, yeah, but it didn't fix anything, did it?" I clenched my jaw. She deserved what she got. "Maybe," he said, nodding slowly. "But what about you?" I stayed silent, because I didn't have an answer. Jason sighed, setting his glass down. "Look, I get it. You needed to make her feel what she put you through. But at some point, you have to stop letting her control you, even if it's through your anger." I scoffed. "I'm not angry anymore." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you?" I opened my mouth to argue, but the words didn't come, because deep down, I knew the truth. I was still angry, and that meant she still had power over me. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. Her number was still in there. I should have deleted it weeks ago. Instead, I just stared. My finger hovered over the screen, tempted to call her, to text her, to see if she was still drowning in the wreckage I had left behind. But what good would that do? Jason was right. This wasn't freedom. This was a prison of my own making. And if I wanted to move on, I had to let go. The next day, I went to the coffee shop we used to go to on weekends. I told myself it was just for a drink, just to kill time before heading to work. But as I stepped inside, my breath caught in my throat, because she was there, sitting by the window, staring down at her phone with tired eyes. She hadn't noticed me yet. I could have turned around and left. I should have. Instead, I walked forward, my footsteps slow, deliberate. She looked up at the last second. Her eyes widened in shock, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. "Daniel," she breathed. I sat down across from her, my face unreadable. "Clara." She swallowed hard, glancing around like she wasn't sure if she should run or stay. "I wasn't expecting to see you," she said softly. "Neither was I admitted. She looked different. Not the confident, smiling woman I had once loved. Not the secretive, cheating woman I had come to despise. Just someone lost. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, shifting in her seat. "How have you been?" I let out a short laugh. "Why do you care?" She flinched. "I guess. I don't know. I just do." Silence stretched between us. Finally, she spoke again. "I lost everything," she whispered. "My job, my friends. Even my parents won't talk to me." A part of me enjoyed hearing that. But another part of me, one I hadn't expected, felt hollow. Because what was left now? What else was there to take from her? She had nothing. And maybe that should have made me feel powerful. But instead, it just made me feel tired. "You're the only person who ever really knew me," she said, looking down at her hands. "And now you hate me." I exhaled slowly. "I don't think I hate you anymore." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "You don't?" I shook my head. I thought revenge would fix everything. But it didn't. She swallowed hard, her fingers trembling. "Then why did you do it?" I stared at her. "Because you deserved it." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I know," she whispered, "and I'm sorry." For the first time, I believed her, but it didn't change anything. "You made your choice," I said, standing up, "and now we both have to live with it." She didn't try to stop me. She just sat there, watching me leave. And as I stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the cold morning air, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Closure. Not revenge. Not satisfaction. Just the end. And maybe that was enough. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Walking out of that cafe, leaving her sitting there with the weight of her own choices pressing down on her shoulders, felt like the final piece falling into place. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't satisfaction. It was just acceptance. I had spent so long trying to destroy her, trying to make her feel what I felt, that I hadn't stopped to realize something simple. I didn't need to anymore. The past was behind us. There was nothing left to say. And for the first time since I had discovered the truth, I could see a future that didn't involve her at all. That night, I went home, poured myself a drink, and sat by the window, watching the city lights. No anger, no sadness, just quiet. A different kind of silence. Not the suffocating, hollow kind I had felt in the weeks after she left, but a peaceful one. A silence that didn't feel like something was missing, because nothing was missing anymore. I had finally let go, and I was free. Letting go of the past was one thing. Figuring out what came next was another. I had spent so long chasing revenge that I had forgotten what it felt like to just live. I started small, waking up early, going for runs, trying new restaurants, saying yes when friends invited me out, letting myself enjoy things again. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't checking my phone, wondering where she was, or who she was talking to. I wasn't pretending everything was fine while drowning in doubt. I was just existing, and it felt good. Like maybe, just maybe, I could be happy again. It happened on a random afternoon. I was at a bookstore, flipping through pages of a novel I wasn't really interested in, when I heard a voice behind me. That's a good one. I turned. She was standing there, smiling, holding a coffee cup in one hand and a book in the other. Not Clara. Someone new. Someone I had never seen before. She had kind eyes, a confident stance, a presence that felt warm, but light. Not like the heavy weight of everything I had been carrying for so long. I blinked, caught off guard. Oh, yeah? She grinned. Yeah. The ending is terrible, though. I smirked. That's a hell of a way to recommend a book. She laughed. I figure honesty's important. I paused. Honesty. Something I hadn't had in a long time. I didn't know where this was going. I didn't know if I was ready. But for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't afraid to find out. It wasn't some grand, dramatic moment. No fireworks. No swelling music. Just small steps. One conversation at a bookstore turned into a coffee. A coffee turned into a dinner. A dinner turned into laughter. Real laughter. Not the forced kind I had faked for so long. And before I even realized it was happening, I was living again. Not just surviving. Not just moving through the motions. Actually living. Clara became nothing more than a memory. A lesson learned. A past that no longer haunted me. And as I walked down the street, hand in hand with someone new, someone who had never lied to me, never betrayed me, never made me feel like I wasn't enough, I realized something. I had won after all, not by destroying someone else, but by finally choosing myself. And that was the real victory.